Here we go.
Great. Good morning, everybody. Today we're talking about water, art, and food. And we've asked you to look at a number of different artists and thinking about how their work relates to thinking about our food systems and sort of, for me, the sort of overarching relationship between all of the artists is their interest in equal justice and access. And so I think we want to look at their work or talk about each of their projects in relationship to how they either provide access or to water or sort of think about how sort of food as a social right. So wanted to just start with Mary Mattingly, whose work, you looked at her video about Swale, or you will be looking at her video about Swale. And we also just added a video under the additional resources section in Moodle for another project that she did called Triple Island at Pier 42, which relates to a couple of the other projects that we'll be talking about today too. And that's on the lower, it's a park on the lower, an aspiring park. I'm not sure whatever happened with Pier 42. Sarah, do you know ultimately what happened?
I think it was like a temporary park because they were like redoing that area, and so they made it was activated for a few years before the actual re-landscape got done.
But did the re-landscaping ever get completed, or is that part of the? It's on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and I don't know if the.
I think
it's completely.
Yeah. Woo.
Okay. Great, and I know that there's, and I don't know if that changed the design, the current design of Pier 42. That part.
Think it. Yeah.
Anyway.
I think it influenced it. I think that was like part of the whole point. And I think LMCC was in charge of that, was in charge of activating the space with art, if I'm remembering correctly. And I think that was their whole point, was to try to kind of get influence or have some small bit of influence on what actually happened. And I'm pretty sure, I feel like it did. I don't know. I might be making that up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think for me, the Pier 42 project, which we'll talk about in relationship to Mary and with Rachel Stevens, it was sort of the most comprehensive community engaged planning process I've seen. They did a really good job with it. So I'm amazed by the amount of work that they did to bring the community to the site even before the design of the park was completed, to make sure that part of the goal of this design process was to, and I know I'm getting off track, but was to really think about how the community would use the park and how important access to the water is. So it showed a commitment on behalf of the city to actually listening to the community, which is, I think, a very impressive thing. And I'm curious to actually see how it all played out. Any case, Mary Mattingly is an artist that lives and works in New York City. She was a part of the Works on Water Triennial in 2017. She submitted for her installation for the Works on Water exhibition, she submitted a video of she builds these sort of habitats that are self-contained, and at least in her past work, she did this. And she, it was sort of an obsession for her to think about how you could live completely off the grid and be self-sustaining. And that's what you'll see in the video of about Triple Island, is an on-land version of this type of project. And it became, I'm not sure when she started doing these habitats. Sarah, do you have a sense of that?
I feel like it was the mid-aughts.
Okay.
Yeah. She started off doing like lots of sculptural things with trash, actually, and like making huge balls and carrying them around, and
right,
kind of linked to performance. And then the habitats, it might have been the late aughts. I feel like the first time I encountered it was maybe 2012 or something, but I think she
not necessarily in response to Hurricane Sandy.
I don't think, no, I think she started doing it before. Yeah.
Okay. In any case, we do recommend that you watch the Triple Island video, because we have shared her manifesto with you. And I think, she's really looking at social systems and how we can rethink them. And I think it's fascinating that she wrote a manifesto. In fact, any of us can write a manifesto and put it out into the world, which I think is a really empowering thing to think about. And her manifesto really looks at, I have it somewhere here, but just sort of thinking about all the different social systems that, economic order, education, ecological order, social order, and towards a non-violent art. Sort of the ultimately thinking about that and thinking about how we can dedicate ourselves to living non-violently today. And it's a very ambitious question. And I think that Triple Island and Swale both relate or sort of embody her thinking in the manifesto. Mm-hmm. So I highly recommend that you look at that video.
Emily, should we make it so that they can choose to put Swale or Triple Island in the comprehension and just do one but choose? Or is that too complicated?
Comprehension? Yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, no, that's fine. We're still asking you to respond to 7 artworks, but you can choose between Swale or Triple Island.
Yeah.
And Triple Island, again, was done at Pier 42. Swale is a barge that actually moves around. I think it's only been in Manhattan. Has she taken it anywhere else outside of, not Manhattan, but outside of the Bronx?
No, it's been in the Bronx. It's been on Staten Island. It's been in Governor's Island. It's been lots of places all around New York Harbor, but I don't think it's gone outside of, maybe it's gone up the Hudson. I'm not sure, actually.
Okay.
It might have. All around New York Harbor.
And Sarah, you've been on Swale. Do you want to talk about what it feels like to be there?
I have. Yeah, actually, it was funny. I went there when we did the triennial. We had an event that happened on Swale, and I'd heard a lot about it, and it looks like the pictures. Although I think depending on the time of year, there is a different amount of food growing there. But I think what I find incredible about what Mary's done with Swale is that she's really, like, she's ended up having a whole group of people who now are very dedicated to managing this project. They really care about these questions of food and access to public food in the city. I think just like a little tidbit that I remember from talking to her when it was just getting going was about, it all kind of stemmed out of this realization that we in the city, there's so many people who need food, and yet there's a rule against having public food or being able to have trees that bear fruit and eat them. And so that's why you don't see apple trees in Central Park, because you're technically not supposed to have that. And I don't remember all the logistics of why, and I would have to look into that further, but I think Swale kind of came out of realizing that, well, we could put food on a boat and access it, because on the waterways that description does not hold. And so it was really her way of kind of subverting the system and making a change that, implementing on a scale that she could manage, a change that she wanted to see happen in her city, which I think is really inspiring to consider, like, okay, if you don't like the way something is going, how can you subvert the system and put it somewhere that makes it okay? And the waterways, the rules are very different on the waterways. And obviously it was a lot of work for her to get a barge and build a forest on a barge, a floating food forest. And it doesn't feel like a forest, but it's more like a garden. It's more like a community garden that's on a barge.
Okay.
So yeah, but I think that's a great lesson for us all in terms of just rethinking how do we shift something that we want to see change.
Right. And not to take away from Mary's work at all, but there is another artist collaborative that's done a project that's similar in nature but very different in form. It's a collaborative called Fallen Fruit, and it's the artists David Allen Burns and Austin Young. They're not based in New York City, but you can look them up at fallenfruit.org, and they've played with this idea of foraging like Mary, and sort of skirting the rules where they're thinking about fruit that actually falls from the tree, so you're not foraging for it, you're able to just collect it, and then it becomes public property. And so they've just gone about it in a totally different way, but a very similar impulse to skirt the rules and provide equal opportunity to food. So it's just kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And Mary, just before we leave Mary, I just want to talk about her collaborative approach to her work. She is very much an artist who believes that bringing others into the process only makes the work better and richer. And I think she believes that to her core. So even when she puts together an exhibition, she often takes other artists in to help her think through the process. She still owns the work, but it's very much a collaborative approach to making art, which I find really interesting. And a lot of artists do this. So the idea, again, I think we mentioned this, the idea of an artist working alone in a studio is sort of not where these artists are coming from that we're talking about. Everybody is very much about collaborating and pulling ideas together that make the work richer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's sort of built a nice transition, I think, into talking about Rachel Stevens' fish stories and the Waters Past and Waters Future. Rachel also was commissioned to do the Fish Stories project as part of the Pier 42 project, and she collaborated on this project as well, I believe.
With Meredith Drum, yeah.
With Meredith Drum, and Meredith and Rachel have both been residents at the Works on Water House on Governor's Island, and Rachel also did a expedition for the Works on Water Triennial in 2017, where she, and I think we reference it in Moodle, she did a walking tour of Collect Pond, which was one of the original freshwater sources in Manhattan, and it's right above City Hall. And it's no longer there, it's really just a little fountain, if I remember it correctly. But she did this walking tour through that took us into Chinatown, and sort of talked about the politics and the progression of Collect Pond to the point where it was no longer a clean water source. And it was actually, if I recall correctly, owned by Aaron Burr or Thomas Jefferson, and it became like a holding of Chase Bank, like the original Chase Bank. Sort of a fascinating history of the combination of natural resource and banking and economics. In any case, Fish Stories was this beautiful project where Rachel and Meredith reached out to the community and asked them to, in the Lower East Side, and asked them to share their favorite fish recipes. And more than just collecting recipes and creating a recipe book or a cookbook, it was really the collection of stories and the sort of combination of histories of people living in the Lower East Side that made it such an interesting collection. And they also, they set up tables at public events where kids could draw and make pictures of fishes and, sort of think about their access to the water and their relationship to water, but also just these conversations that happened among the residents about their favorite recipes and access and, how things have changed over time. So that's sort of my approach and level of interest in this project, is that conversation that happened.
Yeah, and sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask if you wanted to add to that, or. Yeah,
I was going to say that I love that it resulted in like a recipe book, because I just think they're like, these recipes really, you'll see, are in this book of Fish Stories. So she interviewed the people, or I think it was more conversations and less like formal interviews, but then with the eye on collecting these stories and collecting the recipes. And so it is kind of functions like a cookbook, but bringing out all these questions about fishing in our New York City waterways, which I just love. And I think is important to think about. I think both of Rachel's projects is great to have them as examples, because while she definitely has, she spent a lot of time thinking them up and dreaming them up. It's definitely something, her final forms are things that are potential to do in this class, to be inspired by talking to people, and then think about, okay, what's the collection, or what are you collecting? What kind of stories do you want to collect? And recipes is just such a wonderful thing. For instance, talking about fish. And then also with the Waters Past and Waters Future, she made these maps they're like new maps that then can be used to reignite our understanding of Collect Pond into the public consciousness, and then gave walking tours, and so both those forms are also things that you guys can be playing with as you work towards your final creative project. I know that we don't have that many days left, but these are things that could, if it inspires you, you can run with it, this kind of form. And I think we've seen some students inspired by this work in the past. And so I love that these things feel doable in terms of the form.
Yeah, and just to sort of reiterate that Rachel's day job, is she's a designer. So it very much plays into her artistic practice. So all skills can be applied to your projects. Her works, the ultimate works, have a really nice design quality that match the project. The fish book, the Fish Stories, has a very community feel to it, and I think that's done on purpose. And the Collect Pond is a little bit more, the maps feel a little bit more professional and corporate, and it just again matches the location and the scale of the project. So it's something to think about.
Yeah.
Anything else about Rachel, or should we move on to Water Bar?
Move on.
Okay. Water Bar is a project that that is located in Minneapolis, Minnesota, or is it in?
It's in Minneapolis.
It's in Minneapolis, and it's the collaboration of two artists, Shanae, I'm just looking up their names, Shanae Madison and Colin Klecker, or Kloecker, and they are very interested in collaborative arts and ecology projects, environmental science, water policy, arts activism, and thinking about creative services and products. And they created Water Bar as a place, but it's also an idea that they can travel. And they sort of base their work thinking about an indigenous knowledge, thinking about I'm pulling a quote from their work, water is a relative, not a resource. And so they're really interested in sort of having conversations about water at the Water Bar, and sort of thinking about our relationship to water and restoring that relationship. So the place itself is this very sleek looking, like a regular bar that you go into, and there are servers, and you can do tastings. But really the goal there is to incite or provoke conversation about water. And there's a video online that you can pull up if you're interested, that sort of shows one of their water tastings. It's kind of cool to see. It's called Water Bar Takeover TV, and I can add that into the additional resources if you want to look at it. But sort of thinking about the sort of, on a very high level in this video, they talk about the sort of connoisseurship of water and the different tastes. But on a more basic level, I think they're interested in thinking about where water comes from, how we use it more carefully, and our access to it. Mm-hmm. So they're very interested in sort of doing these water tasting workshops, traveling, that's sort of offering their services in a way that will make it more accessible all over the country, which I think is interesting. Yeah. And they do programming at the bar. Mm-hmm. It's just a really interesting place to be. Yeah. Is there anything you want to add to that, Sarah?
Well, I did a tasting because Shanae was at a water conference I went to about a year and a half ago. And yeah, it was really interesting to taste. I mean, I think whenever you go to a different city or place, I think we probably all experience like tasting the water from the tap, and it tastes different. And so it was interesting though to actually have waters from different bodies of water, like different rivers. In Minneapolis, it's landlocked, but the different lakes and different rivers, and to actually really consider that from a taste perspective. I think it's really, I like to think about things sensorially, and what do you see, what do you hear, what do you taste, what do you smell, what do you feel. And so this is the project that I had encountered that was really working with water as taste. So there's some weird feedback happening.
Yeah.
You hear that?
I do hear it. Yeah. Just occasional though.
Yeah. Spencer, are you on mute, or are you on? I might just put you on mute if you're not talking, but send us a chat if you want to unmute yourself. Okay. Let's see if that fixes it. Maybe it will, maybe not. Nope, didn't fix it. Okay, Spencer. It's not you. All right. Anyway, let's keep going. What?
It wasn't me.
No, it wasn't you. Okay. Well, maybe it's me. Sorry, guys. I don't know why, but
it's better now.
Okay.
I don't hear it now. Do you still hear it?
A little bit, but we can ignore it. Okay. Yeah, let's keep going. Next.
Okay. So next is Paloma McGregor, Building a Better Fish Trap. And Paloma also did an installation or a commission for us for the 2017 triennial, the Works on Water triennial, and she has developed Building a Better Fish Trap, or is developing Building a Better Fish Trap, I should say. It's an iterative project that she has been developing and will ultimately, or do the final iteration in 2021, if I remember correctly, on St. Croix. It's in August 2021 in Christiansted, St. Croix, which is where her father lived. And this project is about, her father was a fisherman.
Did he die?
Sorry?
Did he die? I thought he was still around.
He may be. I'm sorry. I did not mean to be talking about him in the past tense.
I think it's like 92, yeah.
Okay. So where her father lives, and the project is in St. Croix will be, if I understand it correctly, a interactive project, almost a processional, where the community can be involved in the project or in the performance. And she has done iterations of it many, many times in the development of the project. Right now, she's in residence at University of Virginia, or is it VCU, I think, in Virginia. For us, she took elements from the sort of performance set and set them up in the exhibition at 3LD Art and Technology Center. And part of the project is her father taught her how to tie a fishnet, so, the most literal part of the project, and which is an art form that is going away. And she created a fishnet for our installation and strung it across the gallery, and invited, and also had other elements of her stage set, sort of felt like a living room, but prompted visitors to the exhibition to write down or on notes that could be hung from the fishnet their first memory of water, if I remember the prompt correctly. And it was really interesting to see the collection of these memories come together, and that sort of will play into her presentations as she takes the project forward. And the version that we've asked you to look at is a project that she did in the Bronx, and it was an interactive performance. And she
the audience was on boat.
Yeah, it was a boat trip that you actually sort of progressed through it, and there were performers along the banks of the Bronx River. So it became this very interactive experience, which reviewed by the New York Times, and you can read that and see, they talked about sort of the shortcomings of the project, but also the ambitiousness of the project.
And she's a dance-based artist, which I think is interesting. Like that's her background in main form. Right.
And again, her work is very collaborative, very much about sort of collecting stories and asking the performers and the audience to contribute to the work. Anything else we want to share about Paloma?
She'll be doing something in the upcoming triennial in 2020 with us too, in the Bronx probably. And I think there's something interesting about her, like building this body of work that just kind of keeps on growing and changing, and really is around the themes that are coming from her father and the stories and water and fishing and kind of really coming from a personal, I guess that's kind of what I would impart, is that it's coming from a personal story place and then creating this body of work around that.
It's starting, I think, to add to that, it's starting very personal and becoming almost universal, where we can all connect to the work. So again, to relate it back to your creative project, personal stories are incredibly important to the work that you're creating. That there are common threads that we can all relate to the work. And I think Paloma's done a very good job of showing us how that's possible, as well as Rachel and
Mary.
Yeah.
Lily.
So lastly, we want to talk about Lily Consuela supported Taguiri's Eating Water Project. And Lily was a resident with us in 2018 at the Works on Water House on Governor's Island. And she is very interested in exploring how to modify our lifestyles to withstand the environments that are emerging as a result of climate change. And she's doing this through the lens of food and thinking about, how we're going to have to adapt our eating habits, or might have to adapt our eating habits, to think about food sources that are sustainable and through sea level rise, flood, and drought, and sort of creating, in a more concrete way, she's creating new recipes that we can sort of think about, saltwater tolerant foods like seaweed or taro root, and just really sort of the work itself is about creating these feasts that are made from food sources, and the serving plates are made from sustainable sources, using rainwater to help create plates out of plant materials that are sustainable. So her project, the Eating Water project, resulted in 15 recipes, plates created from ocean water and rainwater. She served prickly pear jellies, a melting tequila aloe cocktail. She served desert fruits, cracked earth barley crackers, lentil chechi dip. I mean, it all sounds really appealing. And the pictures that she took to document the project are really alluring and beautiful. But it's a brown, again, sort of a really, for me, very frightening thing to think about. And yet she's creating this very approachable, alluring, almost sexy way of thinking about the future, which in my mind helps to ease the anxiety about climate change in some way. Not that I think any of us want it to happen, but she makes me feel like there's a really fruitful and potential future. So I really appreciate the work that she's doing. So that's what and I know she did a dinner party just recently for the Creative Time Summit. And continues this work. And she is also a designer by training. So again, the aesthetics of the work are really important for her, and how she presents it. So.
Right, like developing the recipes and then actually like having a dinner party and her friends can experience it, or her audience can experience
it.
I think what's interesting too, I know there are a couple people who said that they feel creative in the kitchen in our class, and so I think it's interesting to look at how artists are kind of dealing with food in the form that their project approach sometimes. So we have Rachel who's looking at it from a stories and collecting recipes, and then Lily who's actually dealing with the tangible taste and the and sort of thinking creatively about that, but the form is actually a meal, you know?
Right.
So that's something that also could be potentially explored as a form for some of you. Yeah.
Great. Well, should we talk for a minute, Sarah, about the assignment for tomorrow?
Yes. Good idea.
So we're asking you to turn in for tomorrow, in addition to your, let me get back to it. In addition, oh no, you don't need, today you're doing comprehension.
Yeah.
Tomorrow is the student sharing. So what we'd like for you to do is turn in a quick video. Let me make sure that we've written it up.
Yeah, we wrote it up. So it's like, so and many of you already did a good job with a very sort of initial ideas and a proposal, but this is a chance to do a 300-word description of your project where it stands right now, as well as an image, at least one image, or it could be a video of a work of your work now as it's progressed. All of you should be pretty far along with your plan, that you should have a plan and you should know what you're doing. And what we'd like you to do is just record. Hopefully this will not be too challenging on your phone, or, you know, we want it to be really easy. Just record a very short video of you for 1 minute, no more than 1 minute, just telling us what you're doing. So imagine if we were all in class together and you just had to kind of stand up and say, okay, here's what I'm doing, and try to address as many things as you can that we're asking for in the creative project. So really, once you write out your description and have some images, we don't necessarily want you to read that, but it's sort of answering the same questions in a sort of just a conversational form. You know, what are you doing? Where is your piece located? What's the site? What issue or topic or problem are you addressing? Have you been researching? How would you maybe frame your research as a question? And then what are you doing as an artistic action in relationship to your work? What will you do? And then really importantly, who's your audience and how will they experience their work? And then what will the final of your creative project be? These questions are all in the assignment, so don't worry, they're all written down. But those are the kind of, and it's 60 seconds or less, so just try to be as concise as you can, as clear as you can, make the decisions, and let this be a way to move the project forwards if you need to make some decisions about what you're doing. And share with us that way. So and our hope is that this will give us a chance to give you some more feedback before you turn in the final project, and allow, and really the image is important because we need to see what you're doing in order to kind of, and we need to hear about it. But to see it is important, to see a work in progress so that we can kind of give you that feedback that will be helpful.
And we'll get to the feedback very quickly. So you have the weekend to think about it.
Yes. Indeed.
All right.
Yes. Spencer, do you have any questions?
I do not, no.
Right. Well,
Okay.
thank you this morning.
How's your project going? Do you want to give us an update, or you want to just do the video thing?
I'll just do the video thing.
Okay, perfect. Amazing. Okay, cool. I think then it seems like we're done, right?
Yeah, we are. Thanks for joining us this morning, and we'll look forward to seeing your videos tomorrow.
Wait,
Yeah.
one last thing, which is just in the additional resources, we have the Underwater New York issue, and I recommend looking at that. Especially if you're sort of wondering about if you're needing more inspiration for your own project, because there's a lot of artists who have been in residence with Works on Water and exploring different things, and it might give you some more help if you scroll through that. And then, the last thing I wanted to say was also that you know, water and food, we're sort of purposely juxtaposing this class with, or putting it next to the classes with Professor Andrews and him dealing with the food and the water question. So we're hoping that that will also kind of spark some ideas for you based on what you've been learning from him, and how that relates to then what these artists are doing from an artistic perspective, with some of the same questions, some of the same topics, and some really different topics. Yeah.
Great. Yeah.
So that's it.
Awesome. Okay. Well, have a nice day, everybody, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks.